Hey, how's it going, everyone? Just back again with another lesson. So I want to talk about the elect and then how that pertains to the end times. And so I'm kind of focusing on this just because, the verses that I brought out many times that, and I'll read one here in Second Ezra that talk about the end times being for the elect. So the more we know about them and understand who they are, their characteristics, and where they'll be, then we can understand salvation, which is tailored for them. And so that's the quote unquote spirit of the last few lessons. And so they govern the timing of the end times because they're constantly complaining, to the Father, and then that triggers a moment, an event that obviously the Most High already knows, and then for Christ to return, and so God is essentially making the earth uncomfortable, for them to complain, and then he sends his son to return, and then that kicks off the end times, officially. But 2 Ezra 16:73-74, then the tested quality of my elect shall be manifest as gold that is tested by fire. We're going to see it in the sky. Verse 74, hear my elect, says the Lord, behold, the days of tribulation are at hand, and I will deliver you from them. So this group is going to be delivered out of tribulation. Okay? And then the mixed multitude go through great tribulation. And great tribulation is defined by Jesus himself in Matthew 24 as a time that the world has never seen. That much chaos worldwide, okay? So it's very, very different than tribulation. And so, just be aware of that. And so it also says here in 74, hear my elect, which is the same language as in Revelation 18:4, come out of her, my people, and this voice comes from heaven. And so just know that this group is hearing God's voice, directly. Just be aware of that. And so they dictate the timing of the end times because the end times are going to be cut short for their sake. And so it's very, very important to know, their characteristics, and like where they're going to be, geographically and all that. And then this will explain why I get on people who come by here and say, it's a 10-year time frame or 15-year time frame. And so it's not on that time scale, and then, I'll use an analogy to sort of prove that, I guess, qualitatively. But again, we get an understanding of this group. This is the group in Revelation 14:3, and they sung as it were a new song before the throne and before the four beasts and the elders, and no man could learn that song but the 144,000 which were redeemed from the earth. And so they have a unique set of knowledge that God gives them, and so just be aware of that. And then the language here is redeemed, and then in 2 Ezra it was delivered. And so this is the group that were delivered from the earth. They're going to be, it's the focus of the salvation event is for them. And so this is why I want to use this analogy to help people understand why it's not 10 years from now or 15 years from now. Okay, it's closer to 10 days than 15 days than 10 years and 15 years. Okay, it has to be. And so just think about this. The Earth's population, according to Google, is I think it's like 7.8 billion. Okay, let's just go with that, whether it's right or not. Maybe it's on that order. And then New York City, the population is 8 million. Okay, so population of the world, the Earth, is 1,000 times more than New York City. Okay, so now we can just picture New York City, for people who've been there and know about it. It's like a bustling place, people busy, banking, and then there's people of all different, literally almost probably every nationality is represented in that city in some way. Tourism and all that, and then just people living there. And then, it's, so it's 1/1000th of the entire Earth's population, okay? And then, it embodies all the characteristics of Babylon, America. And so, greed, like sin, drugs, entertainment, everything, sports and all that kind of stuff, just debauchery, and all that kind of stuff, and opulence and, imbalances. I've lived there for a time, and the poor and just people are just out of their mind. It's like you either have incredibly rich people or incredibly poor people, and then it's just that kind of a place. And it's in the dirty parts it's disgusting, and then the rich parts it's really rich kind of thing. So it's rich and poor, that kind of thing, in Revelation 13. So let's take that as a microcosm of the whole world, which this salvation event is going to be across the entire flat earth. But let's look at New York City as an example. Okay, so let's now take the 144,000 and divide that number by 1,000, because we're just looking at New York City. So imagine like a place like New York City, which, like I said, has approximately 8 million people. God would be looking at and using the temperature check for that city only 144 people, okay, and 144 men. And then, so imagine like, just kind of, this is not going to happen like literally, but imagine Christ preaching in New York City, and then he has 144 chairs, 12 rows of 12, people, 12 by 12, okay, grid of chairs, and they're open, for people to come and sit. Who's going to sit there in a place like New York City? Okay, so this is why I want people to understand the verses like Jeremiah 31:8 are literal. Okay, and then it's obvious to me, and I just want it to be obvious to others so they understand why what's about to happen is going to happen. Behold, I will bring them from the north country and gather them from the coast of the earth, and with them the blind and the lame. The woman with child and her that travailed with child together, a great company shall return thither. And so God's heart and mind is with the poor. Okay, just understand that I've done a live stream on that where I just literally started reading all the verses that talk about the poor. Okay, and there's so many, you can't even count. And so it's an obvious and consistent narrative from the beginning to the end of the Bible. And then Christ himself was humble and lowly. Okay, he wasn't pretending to be that way. All right, and same with the two witnesses and this group. Okay, so imagine a place like New York City where Christ is preaching with a 12 by 12 grid of chairs. Who's going to sit down there? Some people will just come because they need a break. They're like, oh, okay, I have a chair here and somebody's preaching, a dark-skinned person preaching the gospel. Okay, and then some will just be like, oh, I don't want to hear this. Okay, and then they got a meeting, their phone rings, they got to go, and then they got all this kind of stuff, and then whatever. And so who is going to be there in a place like New York City? It's the homeless. Because at least they have a place to sit. And then Christ, as we've seen in the Bible, will feed them. I don't just leave them starving. Okay, so other people don't want to eat that. They want to go with their friends into the restaurant and all that kind of stuff. And so think about a place like New York City. If you've been there, it's incredibly busy, just people all over the place, okay? The Bible makes an outlandish claim that God is going to stop all of this. The record stops for 144,000 men across the earth, and some of them are going to be blind and lame, okay? And so that's not a large number of people, okay? So I know that everybody's tempted, we all are, to base the end times on our condition, okay? That's why I know that it's on the order of days, because God bases his decision to return on the complaints of the blind and the lame, the very poor and in the destitute. They're forgotten about. Okay, so I want people to understand that if we could literally run this type of an experiment, and this literally happened, when Christ was here, he didn't have those kind of chairs, literally, but it's that kind of thing. If you were to have somebody preaching the genuine gospel and then put, 144 chairs in front of them, the only people that will be there are the poor and the oppressed. Everybody else would have something else better to do. And then that's who God cares about. I just want people to understand that. And then who's taking care of them? Okay, nobody. And so definitely not in a place like New York City or America or anywhere on earth. And then you get a good sense of what they will look like too in a place like New York City, because it's going to be just a medley, of all different types of people, but they're all going to be poor and the oppressed. And what that individual will be saying will be good news to them only. Because that individual, let's say it was Christ or one of his prophets, would be talking about that city being burned. Okay, that's not good news. No one wants to hear that. Okay, well, I have a date later. I don't want this place to be burned. Okay, that's not good news, except that group that would be sitting in that 12 by 12 grid, because they're going to be taken away, because they're the first fruits, because they're the ones who sat there every day. They had nowhere better to go. Okay, they were just like, this is the best that we would not want to be anywhere else. Cancel everything, okay? And they'll sit there and that kind of thing. So just be aware of that. That's why this salvation event is, even though we're living in times where it's very clear something's going on, it's going to be surprising to even the religious people who's taken away. And I don't want the people who come by here to be surprised at the timing of it, which is soon, and then who's taken away, okay? God will not change his mind from what he's written, and it's everywhere. Okay, so these people that come by here and say 10 years and 15 years, I know that they're Satanists, because they're the type of people who would see that 12 by 12 grid and say, well, we still got time. Okay. Doesn't look like it's quite filled yet or whatever. Or I don't want to hear what that person's saying. It's like they just don't want to hear it. They'll be like, no, well, that can't be the Christ. They'll just be like, no, of course not. And so they'll never even possibly, some of them, sit down, and just know that, okay, God does not care about a majority of people on this earth. He would only, in the New York example, care about 144 people. Think about that. 144 people in a city like New York. That's who he cares about. And wherever he goes, whatever borough he'd be preaching in, that's where they'd follow. 144 people. That's not very much, okay? Just know that, and all these people that claim to be religious, Christian people, Hebrew Israelites, and all that kind of stuff, that's a small group, okay? Christ would say things eventually that will offend certain people, and then they'll leave. Except that group. They'll follow him wherever he goes, and then who has the time to do that, first and foremost, right? And so these are people that are rejected by society completely, okay? So just know that it's not a joke when we read about that, that Christ associated with the poor, and the oppressed. He's drawn to them because that's God's spirit that lives inside of those people. Just know that. And so that is why when people come by and tell me that, I know that they're Satanists, because they don't understand the heart and mind of God. And then they've never thought about that. And then that just proves to me that you don't read the Bible, because God cares exclusively about the poor and the oppressed, and that kind of thing. And so just be very, very aware of that's why the end times will be cut short. It's for those 144, like symbolically, people sitting in that grid listening to Christ, and then eventually that group, they wouldn't leave their chair. They would just stay there. There'd be no room for anybody else to, quote, sit down. So I know that these things are all predetermined. I'm just using that as like an analogy to help people understand that it's very practical who follows Christ. Okay, there are people who literally have nothing else that they would prefer to do but to sit there and listen to him, and so just know that. And then if you're like that, then that's amazing, because that's what me and other people that come by here, we want forever. Okay, so we're just getting what, quote unquote, what we ask for, what we already desire. God's going to give that to us forever, and then that's salvation. And so just be aware of that. So it's very practical and spiritual and amazing at the same time. Okay, so that is why Christ will return on any day's notice, because he creates the rich and the poor, and he's created this huge disparity between the rich and the poor on purpose, just like in New York and then now worldwide. Okay, now certain nations are rich and some are poor and all that. It's just on a bigger scale. And so it's not hard to find even 144,000 atheists who don't like it here. Just know that. I could literally find them, like I could literally just stand out in Houston, walk around and ask, are you atheist? If you don't mind me asking, like, yeah, it's like, hey, like if I could tell you that you could be taken away into paradise, and then like, God prepared a mansion for you. I know you don't believe in God, but like some entity prepared something for you. And then, you could have like bliss for eternity. Like, would you be okay with that? What would they say? No, hell no, I don't want that. I want to stay here. Okay. And get more of these. Are you kidding me? And so that's absolutely absurd. And so the most disgusting people on this earth are the religious people, because they're trying to make all of this normal. They're bidding for Satan to stay here longer. No, 10 years. End time teacher says you got to go through the great tribulation first and all that kind of stuff, because they don't understand the heart and mind of God, because they don't understand that there are very easy to find 144 people in a New York City that are absolutely running out of steam, and then they've been beaten down and oppressed. Okay. And then now it's just getting worse every day. And so just know that they don't understand the heart and mind of God, so they can't understand the elect, and then they can't understand the timing of God's return. Hope everyone's doing well. Bye.